Today I am in Dutch uitgever van ondernemingen. That's how I call it, venture publisher, which means that, I don't know, by writing a book, I discovered that a publisher is somebody who finds talent or finds somebody who has a story to tell, helps it shape, and helps to bring that story to the market in the shape of a book and make sure it gets to the customers. And actually, what I do with startups and with companies is very much the same. It's meeting people like you who have ideas and then helping you shape those ideas to something that's focused and clear and everybody can understand, and something that's a good story, and then help you take that story to the market and sell it. And then I have a lot of good relationships and friends and companies I work with who can help you with the actual production work. That's also what a publisher does. They work with printers and whatever. Well, I work with technical people, financial people to help. That's my idea, and I do that under a number of brands. Mainly the Co-Foundry, which is a seed fund and accelerator here in the startup village down the road. Linked to the Kronos Group, Think with People is actually officially the hat I'm wearing this afternoon, because Think with People is the organization that has been mandated by the Kronos Group to bring into practice the partnership Kronos has with Started. So on most of those Started posters you'll see Kronos as a partner. Well, Think with People is a non-profit that actually does that. So I'm here with my Think with People cap. Great organization that helps you in that early stage. If you're looking for you want to get your pitch straight, you want to get your story straight, then contact us. Voila. Also co-authored a little book on reward-based crowdfunding, or the marketing part of that. So if you're looking into crowdfunding, contact me, or go to the website of the Co-Foundry. You can download the book for free, and most of you would have gotten a copy actually if you're in the latest what do you call that, class. You would have gotten it. Okay, enough about me. Let's have a look at the world and how it has changed over the past 30 years. And 30 years ago, when I was building this first website for Samsonite, if you asked people, or if people could buy a car, or had the intention to buy a car, there were three things that influenced them. There was something about word of mouth, other people. You got the money and you were thinking like, which car would I buy? You would talk to your friends, talk at the bar, talk to your colleagues, 10, 15 people maybe maximum. But you would be more influenced by advertising, by by companies sending you messages about our brand is the best, our car is the best, our brand is the best. And then whichever one did the best job or matched most with your values, you would be interested in. And then on a sunny Saturday afternoon, you would walk into a dealership, and it would be basically the sales guy, mostly men in car dealerships, and would be the sales guy who would be selling you whatever he wanted. Because if he's a good sales guy, you go into a Volkswagen dealership, and you're thinking about the Golf, you would go out with a Passat, or you're thinking about the Polo, you would go out with the Golf. That's how simple the marketing landscape was. You just made sure you had some good advertising, good salespeople, and then just hope people don't say bad things about you. That's roughly how simple marketing was. Now, if you look at today, and I have to start changing my stories about cars, because I tell similar stories to students, and then when I say, what would you do if you got 25,000 euros to buy a car? Last time the answer I got was, I would go on holiday. Like, no, you have to buy a car. No, we don't buy cars anymore. Okay, so okay, but assume you want to buy a car. What would you do today? You'd probably again talk to friends and family, but you wouldn't do that only in the sports club or in a bar or around the coffee table. You would probably do that on other channels, social media, websites, like in a digital way. The second thing you would do is go check out your options. What can I buy for 25,000 euros? And there your quest would probably start at Google. So the whole context has changed. You'll look for what you need and what you want. You'll check it with other people, but many more, not the 15, but maybe 300, 500, 1,000 people. Has advertising disappeared? No. You'll still be influenced by advertising, but a lot less. And has a salesperson disappeared? Not yet, but their role has also changed a lot. In fact, what happens today is you get your budget somehow of 25,000 euros. You go and look, you get informed, you're a bit influenced, and then on that same sunny Saturday afternoon, you walk into the car dealership, maybe by coincidence the same, Volkswagen dealership, but rather than saying 30 years ago, like, hey, I'm looking for a family car that doesn't have too high consumption, you would now enter and say, good afternoon, I'm here to buy a dark blue Golf Plus with sunroof. This is the price, and you're going to give me a 7% discount. Because we know, because people know, it has fundamentally changed and has also changed the job of those people. And it is in that context that you will have to bring to market your solution. Normally I would go through the whole room and ask everybody what they're more or less doing, but since we are quite a lot and we're already a bit late, I'm not going to do that. I know a few among you. And I definitely know there are business-to-business solutions, there are consumer solutions, so you'll have to somewhat interpret my stories here. But what is for sure is that the way we market has fundamentally changed. You could summarize it if you want, that we are moving from a marketing strategy that promotes top of mind to a strategy that promotes omnipresence. What do I mean by that? Well, top of mind would be, for those who do not have a marketing background, top of mind would mean that whenever people think of a solution, one of the solutions they would come up with is yours. So the top of mind, if you're looking for a loan for your house, KBC is probably top of mind. Now that's an illusion. Most brands can forget about, because it has become almost impossible to become top of mind because of two things. One, the number of channels. 30 years ago, you could say, let's do some advertising on TV, and you had covered the whole population. Today, if you do advertising on TV, you only cover 70 plus people who do not know how to work a digital set-top box, because everybody else either skips or does not watch TV. My daughter just moved out, doesn't have TV. They have got an internet connection and Netflix and YouTube, and that's what you need. So channels have changed. YouTube is being added to it, Facebook, Twitter, you know all the social channels, all the channels you're watching today. So there are so many channels. You cannot carpet bomb with one channel. You have to address all those channels. So it's much more difficult to become top of mind. And also we're playing in a global world, and especially many of you're playing on a global scale, which means that there's so much competition, so many alternatives, that if there are only 5 solutions in your market, being among the top 3, that's probably feasible. But if you are one of the 50 or one of the 1,000 alternatives on a global scale, being in the top 3 of top of mind brands is going to be impossible. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is it's the same for everybody. And there's a solution which is called Omnipresence. What you can do is try to be there whenever the need arises. Think of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is actually one of those brands that still manages to be top of mind, but they're also omnipresent. A certain Mr. Woodruff once said within Coca-Cola, we want to be within arm's reach of desire. So it means that whenever you feel like having a Coke, or you feel like having a sugary refreshment, then even if you don't think about Coca-Cola, it'll be within arm's reach. It'll be roughly in the building. So in this building, 2 floors down, 3 floors down, 4 floors down, 3 floors down. You can get Coke, and do the tests. Anywhere you get, there's always Coke in the neighborhood. So they are there. What? Coca-Cola. They are there when the need arises, and that's what omnipresence is, and that's what you should be going for. You should be there when whoever your customer is, when the need arises. But you cannot physically be there. You cannot be Coca-Cola, but you can be digitally there. There are ways, especially with the digital world being everywhere around us, especially with mobile, your customers are always connected, so you have to be there when they start doing their research. So how do you do that? Well, and I just realized I took Dutch-speaking slides, but I guess that's okay. I have them in English too, but I didn't do the switch. Now, digital media is more than just a website. Just have a look at this little overview. Just gives you a number of elements. There's your own website, your company website, campaign sites, e-commerce sites, your own mobile application. We group these in what you call owned media, eigen media. It's media you own yourself. You are master of that part. You can change every pixel if you want to. You can change every piece of code on those media if you want to. If you collect an email address on one of those media, then it's yours. Very important, that'll be always be the core or the endpoint of your digital strategy. Now, nobody comes to your website. Bad news. Nobody gets up in the morning and thinks like, hey, maybe I should go to the KBC website or whatever your website is. Nobody does that. You know, there are a number of sites that are destined to be like that, like Google, or like typically news sites. That's where people say, hey, I'm going to go to a news site to get updated, or a site about my hobby. There are a number of successful startups or bigger companies who are capable of building a website where people go to just because it's a daily habit. That's ideal. And very often their business model is, okay, so we'll sell a bit of screen real estate on our website so other people, other companies, other marketeers can attract people through our website to their website. So that's about bannering, it's about all kinds of bannering, cost per click bannering, or even email databases. And you will pay for it, so we call it paid media. A bit on the side here is Google, because you don't pay to be featured, like naturally featured on Google or YouTube or Google Images or Maps. You just have to make an effort. You can pay, but then you're in an advertising model. But here, well, you do have to invest time in there. So if you invest time, time is money. So I do consider all the channels by Google as paid media. And then there's a third group, and that's what we call the earned media. If you look at those terms, by the way, owned, paid, earned media, you'll find slightly diverting definitions. Some people sometimes call it differently. Sometimes they only put PR in here. What the idea is here is that you don't pay anything to get here, you just earn your place. Your Facebook page becomes successful. You can do that by paying. Again, that's advertising. But you can also do it by making the right content, making engaging content, starting conversations, making sure you are part of a community and building up your following that way. That's the earned media. It doesn't mean it's really for free, because this is easier, this is more difficult. Okay, you don't have to pay advertising money, but you do have to make the right content. Either you do it yourself or you have somebody else make it. It's, again, a big time investment here. The advantage here is that once you convince somebody through earned media, then it's a long-term contact. If you convince somebody through advertising, it's a short-term thing. This goes fast, this lasts longer. So depending on what your objective is, you will use different media. But in the end, the idea will be to generate traffic from those media and those media to your own media, because that's where the action is. That's where you make your money. Now, look at that. Quite a complicated story already. How you go about that? Well, you will need a plan. It's coming. You will need a plan, but not a traditional plan. Again, I predict my computer is going to crash between now, and a few moments. But anyway, a different plan. A modern plan, a plan you would all know, because you could consider it, or you could name it, agile marketing. Now, this book was written before the whole agile and what's it called? The whole startup cycle thingy. the lean startup, that whole story was probably written around the same time I wrote this. And the idea is a bit the same. You're going to do your marketing the same way you do your startup. That means that you will not be able to write a plan that says like, okay, from between now and the coming 18 months, these are exactly all the steps we are going to do. You're going to need a much more of an approach that's iterative, that tries out things, changes, measures, tries something new, measures the result, and then acts upon that. Try something new, measure the result, act upon that. So you will not be thinking up your digital marketing plan, or your marketing plan. You will be building it gradually. Two main reasons for that. One, it's less risk. You don't have the money to do a TV campaign, so you will have to start small. And three reasons actually. Secondly, these media change all the time. Like, we're not in a turning point at this moment, but like about a year ago, Snapchat was not a marketing channel. Now it is. Instagram stories didn't exist, or no, it didn't exist. It only was launched in September. So if you look 18 months ahead, you could be missing out on the next big marketing hype or marketing channel. So these channels change a lot. And then and that's probably the most important reason, the speed of measuring and updating your campaigns is of a totally different order than in traditional print or TV or radio advertising. In the most extreme case, TV advertising, they would make a plan in October and say like next year in October we will air this TV spot. They have to buy now 12 months ahead the media, otherwise you don't have it. So you buy 12 months ahead, and then next year in October the spot is shown, and then in November the results become visible, and in December they've analyzed the results. And then it's too late to buy media for the year after that, so they have to buy media for the year after that. So you have a cycle of 3 years. Okay, that's the most extreme case, but that's how traditional marketing used to work. You're looking at Google Ads. Who has been using Google Ads already? About half. You can start today, and in like tomorrow even, but at the longest in 3-4 days, you will already know the results. You will see a lot happening. You see which words work, which ads work, and you can start changing, and you will change on a daily basis. So rather than having a window of more than a year, you'll have a window of like a week at max. So in that kind of situation, you really have to think different, and it's difficult. One of the critiques I sometimes get, especially when I present this to traditional marketing audience, that they say at the end, well, I still don't know how to write my plan. Well, you cannot write a plan. You have to build that plan. And the steps I'm explaining here, and we're going to roughly focus mostly on this part here, is to first think very well about the strategy. How are you going to approach this? Who is your customer? How does he think, and how does this customer go through your customer journey? We'll focus on that, and based on the steps in your customer journey, you will find priority channels. You will discover like, okay, so I have to start with my website and then move on to Facebook, or maybe you have to start with PR, or I mean, it changes from company to company. Although at the end, I'll show you that for startups, there is one rule of thumb that may work. But strategy to determine your priorities, and then you'll say, okay, let's start working on the site and do some changes and let it run for a few days or weeks, and in the meantime work on social media, let it run for a few days, a few weeks. In the meantime start working on advertising, let it run for a few weeks or days, and then go back and see like, okay, so what are the results of what I changed to my website, and what are the results of my social media, and what are the results of my advertising. And each time constantly you get into a loop of adding new channels, testing them, seeing what happens, dropping old ones, bringing in new ones, dropping old strategies, bringing in new strategies, and that way go on and on and on, and constantly test, measure, and adapt your plan and the way you're working. So measuring will be crucial. Your dashboard will be a spreadsheet where you can actually see, okay, this sale has cost me this much, and if I sell through Facebook, it has cost me that much, so I'm going to invest more in Facebook or more in Google or more in Instagram or whatever. That's roughly the big idea. Now, before you start, it's important to ask yourselves a number of smart questions, because to make another comparison, traditional way of looking at marketing would be a Formula One race, where you know how the track looks like, you know how many rounds you have to do, you know what the competition is. So they can, by a few seconds difference, they already know when they're going to pass through which turn at what speed. And then it's just optimizing and optimizing. In a startup world, and especially in a digital world, you're riding a Dakar rally. You're like, this is where I have to be, and how I'm going to get there, I don't really know. So let's try this way. Oh, no, too much sand here. Let's go that way. And then you're off, and then you think you found it, and okay, Google AdWords, that seems to work, and you're going, and you're going, and you're going. But all of a sudden, you realize, no, I had to go that way. So you get carried away by your enthusiasm, and that's a risk. So that's why we want to ask these smart questions before you start, so that you know that. So I'll be talking a lot about strategy today, just to ingrain that in your heads, to like get that story clear. And the first question is one you may have been asked already, especially if you've been sitting together. Some of you have been sitting together with me or with my colleague Sarah. But it's a question we always ask, like, why are you doing this? And it's not something we invented. It's Simon Sinek. Who knows Simon Sinek and the Golden Circle? Again, about 1/3. Look it up. There's a book. It's called Start With Why. But if you want to go fast, you look up the YouTube video, or it's a TED Talk, 18 minutes, and then you know the whole story. I'll try and do it in 18 seconds. What he basically says is, successful companies are companies that start from the why and not from the what. Make the difference. Dell says we sell computers, and they still sell computers. Apple says we think different. We want to disrupt the status quo. That's what they are doing. You have to find your own why. You have to find that in general as a business, but you also have to find that because it will be crucial for your own communication process. In different phases of the customer journey, you will see later, you will use different messaging. And sometimes you'll be talking about the why, especially in the beginning. You'll be talking about, when you do a pitch, that's also what we say, when you're in pitching, you start with the problem, like, why am I here? When I was here, when I started this afternoon, I also pitched myself a bit, saying a bit like, why am I here? I like new things. I like new things in marketing. Okay, so that's my why. That's what I live for. And how did I do that? Well, I told my story. And then in the end, I said, well, so I do think with people in the co-foundry and workshops and stuff. If I come in here and I say, hey guys, I'm a startup coach, and I sometimes invest, then I'm like in the category of another one who's trying to sell us something. And I start with a personal story here, when I start by saying what is the deep motivation behind the business I do, you're all ears and you're like interested in what I'm saying. So that's what Sinek also says, but more in general for companies. So make sure you have those stories straight. And coming to the why is a difficult one. I sometimes try that. I do it when on one-on-one sessions. I often ask 5 times why. If you're with me, you won't even notice, but because I'm not literally saying why, but I'll keep on digging. So so why are you doing your business? Okay, so and why is that so important to you? And and what's the difference with, and how can that be so? And why is that then? And you keep asking that why until people like really get itchy and like stop asking me stupid questions. And then you're close to the real why. And it also changes. It may take you a few weeks or months even, and you may iterate, but at a certain point you have to find your why, and that's not supposed to change. Find your why. It's not inventing a why, it's not something you invent, it's something that's deep inside you and your partners, that's deep inside your company, that's deep inside your culture. The how is what makes you different from other companies. What differentiates you? Actually, this is a better slide for that. So it starts with, why do you do what you do? What are your dreams? What's your purpose, your goals? And then you move to how. Like, how are you different from somebody else? You have a different process, you have a unique selling proposition, you have specific key values. Do you follow workflows somebody else doesn't follow? Now, what makes you different? This is typically what marketeers focus on, which is already good. This is what sales would then focus on, is like, so what do you do? In fact, and what you do should be the proof of your purpose. So if my purpose is to discover new things, and then I say I invest in startups, everybody says, yeah, of course. I mean, if you want to discover new things, investing in startups is probably the best way on earth to do that. So there's a good link there. Nice story. So what you do are the products, the services, the results you are offering to customers. Get that straight. Write it down. Put it in big sheets in your office. Stick it above your bed. It's crucial for your startup. Next question is, who do you want to reach? And I'm going to go a bit away from my slides here, because most of you are not spoiled by traditional marketing thinking. Anyway, who has a marketing background in this room? One, two, three. Okay, like a bit. Okay, that's good. You don't want to market, because most marketing schools still teach you still think in terms of target groups. I hate target groups. I know you sometimes need them, but you don't want to exaggerate too much on that. Target groups are like, okay, so I'm addressing women between the age of 25 and 35 who live in a city and have medium to high income. Or if you would be a car salesman and you're selling, let's say our same car salesman again, and you're selling SUVs, then you say, okay, so I probably need men between the age of 35 and 45 with at least 2 children. It's the men who decide the car. They need to be a bit older because an SUV is more expensive than a smaller car. So you get a whole logic around that. And then the next customer who walks in is a 53-year-old woman who's into monumental art and has no kids, but she just needs a big car. So, okay, if you would have had a marketing strategy based on that target group of men between 35 and 45, you would have never reached her. So that is just an anecdote to show the difference. So what would you do? Well, basically your target group are anybody who has the problem you are trying to solve. That's a very easy definition, of course. A bit too easy maybe. But then you can start looking at what a good way is to is looking at persona and looking also especially at different aspects of that problem. And you'll come up with 3, 4, maximum 5 different angles to look at that. I mean, SUVs, that's probably, there are probably people who buy that because they want to put a lot of kids in there. But that could just as well be grandparents who take the kids to school, as that are 23-year-olds who happen to have a lot of money and already have a lot of kids. I mean, that it exists. So the kids is one. So people with kids, that's an interesting target group. Don't care whether it's a woman or a man. Another group could be people who want to do specific sports activities or hobbies for which they need a lot of space. So, okay, in their car. Okay, that's another. So you're defining target groups based on their needs and not so much on whether they're male or female, young or old, a lot of money, not a lot of money. Sometimes that's relevant. I mean, if you have a wealth management system, you probably will have to address people with a lot of money, that kind of, but that's, I mean, they have a problem, they have to manage their wealth. So that's again based on a need. So start from the customer and think in terms of customer needs. And focus around that, and it'll help you to know who you are talking to. An interesting thing about that is, why do traditional media keep talking about these traditional target groups? Because the media was organized like that, or still is organized like that. If you want to put an ad in Flair, well, the only thing they can tell you is that they did a review, they did an enquête 1 year ago, and they say it's probably, 90% women who read that. between the age of, what is it, 18 and 35? I don't know. I don't read Flair, so I don't know. But you know, they have these metrics in their system. And that's why they try to sell also. They say, oh, you want to advertise? Well, who's your target group? You don't know your target group? Well, that's because they have a definition of a target group. Don't be fooled by that. If you go to Google, that's the perfect example. That's also why Google is making so much money. Google says, I can look in your head. You are typing in volumewagen kopen. Then I know you're looking for a big car. I mean, and Google doesn't care whether you're male or female, or it just looks into your head. It plays onto your needs. Facebook goes in that direction too, but at the moment they're still very much traditional. You can region, which is practical, male, female, but what their holy grail is buying intention. They want you to be able, in the end, Facebook will be able to offer you the possibility to advertise towards people with a specific need. There's already, I haven't checked it lately whether it still exists, but at a certain point I was able to advertise towards people who have the intention to travel to the United States. They just, I don't know how they do that, but they have so much data, they can figure out, oh, this person has the intention to travel to the United States. It could be an interesting target group for you if you're, I don't know why you could come up with a startup for people who want to travel to the United States. But there are, they try and define needs and problems and put advertising around that. In the old days, we used to have press, like highly influencing people. They have a newspaper or whatever with which they reach a lot of people, and they have a certain level of credibility. And then on the other side, there's the rest of us. And the rest of us used to be just everybody else. Now today, we see the rest of us, we now call them aanraders in Dutch, recommenders. I don't know what you would call them. What would be that? Influencers and whatever, recommenders. What do we mean by recommenders? It's like everybody is a recommender. We all are. There are always situations, and Jan van den Berg wrote a book about that. He says like 15% of us is a recommender. So in this group, 15% of you will be a recommender for me. Positive or negative, but 15% of you will go out and talk about it. And that could be those 15% who just like, this came at the right moment, the right time, or because you simply like me, or I don't know, but there's a reason for recommending. So these recommenders are, and you could be a recommender this time, but for the next session, or for your car, or for whichever else, it'll be somebody else. So it's not like always the same people who are recommenders. That's why that combined with word of mouth, it's important to have good good products so people talk positive about you. Now there's a group in the middle, and those are the influencers, because some of those people discovered like, hey, these digital media, I can gain influence through them. I can be more important than somebody else. I have 300 Twitter followers. I have 500, 800, 1,000. People read me, people react, or when I put, I'm a funny person, so when I put something on Facebook, a lot of people react. So gradually, there's a group of people has emerged who, mostly as a hobby, have become influencers. YouTube channels are big. The biggest YouTube channels from the start, or like kind of started this thing, is the makeup tutorials. Makeup tutorials are huge. I thought my daughter was watching makeup tutorials, I think 4 or 5 years ago, all the time. And I was thinking like, it's just my daughter. But then YouTube Belgium launched, so youtube.be. YouTube was already there, but it didn't have a specific Belgian channel or site. And 3 big shots from Google came over to present, like regional and international marketing managers, and the 3 of them, they all used makeup tutorials as the example of how YouTube was making loads of money. And those initial YouTube stars with the tutorials, or the makeup tutorials, they are now millionaires. And there's, you look into your sector, you'll find them, and they're not so difficult to find. You'll find those influencers that are really making a difference. My latest pet peeve is off-road traveling, and I'm now following like 4 or 5 or 6 globally of these overland travelers showing their rigs and stuff. So it's a whole new story, and that's where I learn what to buy and where to buy and what's interesting. So these influencers are important, and they're somewhere between press and the rest of us. So they were typically bloggers before. Depending on your area, it's going to be bloggers, Instagrammers, YouTubers, Facebookers, people with a separate site, and you just have to go and have to find them. Find those influencers and get a connection with them. But watch out, they're not professionals. Some of them are professionals, but most of them are just doing that for a hobby, or a very deep hobby. It means that they're also, on one hand, they're easy to make happy, because they don't have a lot, so if you invite them for a beer, they're already happy. On the other hand, they don't have deontological rules. They just play it by their own rules, so you want to be a bit careful with them. A good rule of thumb to know whether this person is interesting for you or not is to check both reach and relevance. So reach means, how many people follow that person on Instagram or whichever channel is important for you. And then, is this person relevant? If all of you are following me on Twitter today, I'm probably going to break through the 7,000 followers barrier, so you could say I have a bit of reach on Twitter. Now, I'm relevant for a number of things, but I'm not relevant when it's about knitting wool. You can try and do a campaign for knitting wool through me. I can post it on Twitter, and one person will react, that's my wife, but the rest of those 7,000 will not react. So I'm not relevant. So if this is 0, you can have all the reach in the world, but it'll be nothing. If you are very relevant, but you have no reach, well, that's also not very interesting. So look at a balance there. Where I'm saying this is because some people with a lot of reach will pretend and say like, oh, well, I'm reaching so many people, and say, well, if you pay me, I'll put you in touch with so many people. Well, yes, but what people? Are they interested in my product? So think about those influencers carefully. And then comes the next question. How does your customer find your company or your brand? How does he or she get to you? And to discover that, we'll go through a number of steps, which we call the customer journey. And there's 4 steps. A traditional customer journey, and I cannot make as nice a drawing as this one, but what we traditionally use to talk about is a sales funnel. And in traditional marketing, there was an abbreviation which was AIDA, which is awareness. Do people know about my product? Interest, are they interested in it? Desire, would they like to buy it? And are they taking action? And that's like a funnel. And you want to reach as many as possible people there, so as many as possible end up here. Now, these schemes are always oversimplifications. But the problem with this scheme is that it lets out, let's say, 2 important things. First of all, if you think about omnipresence, if you think in a traditional marketing, it's like, okay, let's do advertising to a lot of people and then a few will be interested. If you're thinking in a digital world, what happens is that people will they have a need, that's where it starts from, and from that need, they will start finding out, exploring. So they'll broaden their options, and our funnel is closing, so that's kind of a contradiction. And then another interesting one is at the end, when somebody has bought your product, the funnel stops, where we're saying, no, this is where the story really gets interesting because we have customers who are interested in us. So that's also not in there. So to come to a conclusion here, let's throw that away and have a look at it in a different way. And let's start from the customer need. Let's start from the problem we are solving. Let's start from why we are doing this. Then see, what are your customers doing? How are they looking for a solution? At a certain moment, they'll come to a decision. And once they've made a decision, well, they'll start using your product, they will be your customer. Let's not forget about that, because it's an important phase. While they're using your product, you want to make them happy, so next time they don't explore too much, but they go quickly to the decision. Or what people are saying here is important for people who are here in the exploration phase. People here will say like, are there any happy customers for this product? Let's go and have a look, and then they'll end up here. And if you have a lot of happy customers shouting that out here, that's going to be good to move people from the exploration phase to the decision phase. Let's look at it step by step, because each of those steps has specific channels attached to them. The first step is you will not sell if nobody needs your product. That's why the start with why exercise is so important. If you're sitting here and normally if you started at KBC, at least you should have identified a problem that is really a problem, where people are realizing they have a problem, or maybe people don't realize yet, but at least they have a problem and you are solving a real problem. So the problem has to be there, but the question is that, do the people know they have that problem? It's a pity. Think about your product and ask yourself the question, do your customers know that they should be your customers? If you're selling water, people are thirsty, they know they are thirsty, they need to drink, they'll buy water. Toilet paper, it's pretty obvious, people need that. Now very often in a startup situation, when you're very innovative, people don't realize they need your product. You have identified that, but nobody needed an iPhone. There's these legendary nobody needed a telephone, a mobile phone, 25 years ago or 30 years ago. These legendary YouTube videos where they go around the city. I was in Holland, I think, in Amsterdam, and they go ask people, you need a mobile phone? It's 30 years old. People are saying, you're crazy, why do I need a mobile phone? There's phones everywhere. Now nobody lives without a phone anymore. So that's an example of the need was there, but people didn't know. So you have to think about that for your startup. If you're lucky, it's an active need. That's an advantage. People are really already looking for the solution. Quite often it will be a latent need. It will be a need you have to awake people to. So if it's an active need, basically the need phase for you is easy peasy. You don't need to do anything. You just need to be aware, because people will start looking for a solution, and if you're doing a good job in the next step, they will find your solution. Now, creating or awakening a need is a difficult and expensive process. It basically means that you have to connect with people while they are not asking for it. They're not waiting for you. Because they don't know they have a problem. So you have to interrupt their lives, and that's typically done by traditional media, TV, advertising. Jumping in the middle of your movie and telling you need. An interesting example there, which most people understand easily, is I think it's Nivea. I'm going to look at you to confirm. Nivea has body lotion you can apply, or it's Dove or Nivea. I think it's Nivea. It's body lotion you can apply under the shower, and then you don't have, because apparently, don't use body lotion too often. But apparently, after you shower as a woman, you put the body lotion on, and then you're sticky for 5 minutes, and then that's kind of annoying. So if you apply it under the shower, then you get out and you're all fresh, and you've got your hydration or whatever. Now, before Nivea started promoting that in TV spots, there was no woman on earth that stepped out of the shower thinking I should actually have a body lotion that I can apply under. Maybe somebody came up with that idea, but nobody ever really did it. So most of the people they have that need. Once you see that, and you say, of course, yes, I need that, but I didn't know I needed that. So that's again, letting people know they have that need is an expensive one. It's going to require some push marketing. Now, push marketing, again, can be very annoying, but digital offers a number of alternatives. Basically, anything you do on advertising, real advertising on Facebook, is push advertising. For me, Facebook is the new TV. It's Facebook ads is like you're scrolling through your Facebook, you're not looking for anything in particular, and all of a sudden you see a advertising or content for something, and then you'll say, oh, this is kind of interesting, and you start reading that. So that company is then breaking into your conscience and making you or helping you realize that you need something. So you're not creating a need, you're awakening a need. So channels that are good for that is typically advertising, but again, social media advertising would be a good one there. Social media as such, I mean, if people talk about you, if people say, hey, I used this body lotion this morning and I feel really great, and that could be on social media. And then anything that's online PR, public relations. Public relations is a cheap way of advertising if you can get into the press. But get into the right press. Again, it's good. As a startup, it's an ambition to be in the trends or the TED or if it's digital and data news. But you have to wonder, for some of you that's great, but for some of you it's like, there's no use for that. You want to be in het laatste nieuws, or you want to be in whatever, or in something even more technical. When you're thinking PR, you're not doing PR for your own ego, you're doing PR to reach those people, to convince them that, like, hey, I didn't know that, but I have a problem, and there's a solution for that now. So when people start realizing, yeah, this is a need I have, this is something I'm looking for a solution for, they'll start diverging, and they'll start looking, and they come into the next phase, exploration phase. Why? Well, nobody will buy anything for you before having checked what's going to happen. People know they will end up in a chaos like this when they even just consider to go and buy something. This is in a physical world, but also in a digital world. You're going to end up you start doing some Google searches, start liking some Facebook pages, start visiting some e-commerce sites, and then you'll be bombarded with retargeting campaigns and stuff. So what you want to do before you actually decide is go and explore. And that's why what Google calls the zero moment of truth. In fact, in the process, in the old days here, the action moment, at Procter & Gamble, they call this the first moment of truth. It's that moment when you're in the shop, you're standing in front of how do I go and, me, old man, I go into the blazer, I need to buy shampoo. Well, I go in, I look like a bit more or less at eye height. I see this bottle has a nice color, it has a little square on it that says now 15% free. So, okay, I'm off and I'm out again. That's the old way. My 21-year-old daughter walks into the same shop or a different shop, and she's not doubting. She just walks straight to the rack, says, okay, this is what I need because I saw a haul by my favorite YouTube vlogger yesterday, and she said this shampoo is good for colored hair and is not tested on animals. So she has done her research. She's a new generation. She's your new customer. She knows. She may not have done that research like on the spot, but somewhere around in the customer journey, which she's gone through a few times, she has formed herself an opinion. And that is actually a moment before the first moment of truth. The first moment of truth being the moment you buy. That's why they call it the zero moment of truth. There's a whole website by Google on that. What's interesting is here that there's two things. It says is both in a business-to-business as in a business-to-consumer context. I think it's even more important in a business-to-business context because if you're buying a big jet engine, as she explained, you maybe even want to go and check out the LinkedIn profile of the engineer who did the quality assurance on your I don't know how many $100 million an engine costs. If you're doing these big purchases, you really want to know beforehand what and how about this company and its team before you decide. But it's also for items that cost $1 or less, as they say here. Think about, for instance, apps. So you're going to the restaurant with your little nephew, you got the iPad on you, and like, okay, so you want him to be quiet. So you buy switch those off again. You want him to be quiet, so you're going to download a game. So you're looking at the games. You don't want the game for free because that'll offer in-app purchases. So, okay, I'm going to go for a paying game. It's going to cost me €5. Like, wow, €5. That's expensive. Let's compare. And then you'll look how many stars does it have. What do the reviews say? And then you'll go for the one with the most stars. That's maybe at €5 or €4. So that's an item of, okay, €5, which is not really a lot of money. And you are comparing because you can. I think that's also the essence of many startups and the success of many startups. That is, if you offer that transparency, if you offer the possibility, maybe in a digital way, you are jumping ahead of a lot of competitors. You used to be, if you wanted to take a taxi, it used to be like, well, let's wave at the guy with taxi on top and hope he's a nice guy and he takes me to the right place the fastest way. Now you can go through Uber and say, okay, I want a big car, small car, I want only guys with a star rating of at least 3. You can make a comparison between taxi drivers. So that's just one example. You're just offering the possibility to compare by giving the people the opportunity to evaluate that at that zero moment of truth. Before really deciding to give them extra information, you can make a difference. That could be the whole thing of your startup, basically, to kick out traditional competition. But in communication, that means that people have to find you. People, remember, first step, they know they have a problem, now they're looking for a solution. Where will they look? Well, they'll very often end up on your own website, on your own media, basically. Could be an app. But still today, I would say it's very much also still a website. How will they get there? Well, there will be search engines. Search engines, yes, there's more than Google. If you're looking at Google, the traditional search engines, still 96-97% in Belgium of search traffic. So natural search results, which you get at through search engine optimization, is one way. And obviously, a second channel is paid search on Google. There's an interesting thing here. You would say, oh, online advertising. Where do I put online advertising in the customer journey? Well, Facebook advertising for me is in the first step. Google advertising is in this step. Because people who are here are actively looking for something. They already know they have a problem, so they're just looking for a solution. So if on traditional advertising, like banner ads, you want to be very creative with cool messages and nice images, when you're in this stage, you want to be rather factual. You want to be like, hey, I have a solution for your problem. And it's not because it's got a nice color, but because it's really a solution for your problem. So the fact that Google ads are just text is okay, because in this phase, people are much more rationally looking for a solution. Now, again, when I say search engines, there's Google, but there are actually 2 more types of search engines that you can consider. First, or the second biggest search engine in the world online is YouTube. So any video channels are also search engines for, again, depending on the solution you're offering. People may go and look on YouTube before buying. Before I go buying new tires for my off-road vehicle, I go and look online and I look for reviews and that's where I get my information. What are they talking about? It's the BF Goodrich all-road tire, seems to be great in its newest version. I would not have known that before. I could go and read about it on a website, but it's much more fun if you can actually watch a little video about that. Second search engine is video search engines, mainly YouTube. And then the third type is the App Store itself. In some cases, people may just decide, like, hey, maybe there's an app that can solve my problem. So they'll go into the Google Apps, the Apple App Store, or the Google Play Store, and go look for a solution there. And be creative about that. Maybe they're not literally looking for your product, but they may be looking for, little tools that will help them determine whether they're on the right track or not. Or it could be city guides, for instance, like, I want to travel to Oslo, but I'm not sure whether I'm going to go to Oslo or Stockholm. Well, I may go onto the App Store and say, let's see whether I can find a cool guide. And if there's a great guide about Oslo, it may be a reason to decide my next city trip to go to Oslo. So think about your business again and whether there are solutions in the App Store and whether you can mingle in that. So 3 types of search engines. And then again, social media, although here, depends a bit. If it's really consumer oriented, it's a hell of a job. You cannot monitor all the tweets by everybody who are saying, hey, I might just buy this or that, or I'm looking for this or that solution. But in some cases, it is possible that you monitor social media to find a solution. Who has experience with search engine optimization? Okay, a bit. I'm just gonna, and then we're gonna take a break. Because I could see the energy level going down. Just a small introduction, because these search engines are so important. This is an interesting little pyramid of SEO, which gives you a visual representation of the basics you need to know. First question is, can Google read my website? So a simple thing is, you have a website, and Google just looks at the code, and that's where they read it. Now, most extreme version for the non-technical people here, a Flash. No, let's forget about Flash. That's too old. Let's do a different story. Let's take images. That's a good example. If you put an image on your website, Google can only see it's an image. It says, image, a lot of blue in there, but doesn't know what it is. It's working on that as a search engine, but today Google is not interpreting images. So Google cannot read an image. Now what you could do is the file name could be beautiful skyline of Oslo. Voila. So if people are looking for information about Oslo or city trip or best city trip location in Scandinavia, could be the name of the image. So if people are looking for, then that happens to be something that's happening in Oslo, I mean, it has to be a relevant description, but by giving it the right name, you can explain what the image is about. That's what I mean when I say Google has to be able to read what's on your website. It's just one small example. But it goes a lot further than that. It's just technically your website has to be okay for Google. It has to follow, should not be any bugs in there, it has to be safe. All those technical things are in the fact, like, can I make Google read my site? Now, most websites built with modern tools like WordPress, Squarespace, whatever you might be using, are by default technically okay for Google. But if you want to do something, if you're not technical yourself and you have somebody build your site, you just want to double check that. Second step is content, and that's also the biggest block for a reason. Google bot comes onto your site. If it's not reading anything, if there's nothing to read, it can also not interpret. I'm working with a fashion designer here from Antwerp. She's got the perfect Squarespace website, perfect technically speaking for Google, but there's only images and a few, there's maybe like 8 words on the whole homepage. And those are like functional words. There's no description, no explanation of what her philosophy is, the fact that she's a fashion designer, etc., etc. So it's a great site, but there's no content on it except for images. Not good enough. You need content, and you need well-structured content. So meaning you will use H1, H2, H3 for bringing titles and levels of hierarchical levels in your content. You will need, and it will also have to be regularly updated. So a blog is ideal for that, because if every now and then something new appears on your site, you know what Google does, it comes by your site the first time, scans it, and then 3 weeks later comes by again and sees like, oh, nothing changed, waits 2 months, oh, nothing changed, waits 6 months, and then it never comes back. Well, kind of. On the other hand, if after 3 weeks something changed, they say, okay, maybe I should come back next week. Oh, something changed again, I'll come back in 2 days. Oh, something changed again, I'll come back tomorrow. And then like news sites are crawled multiple times per day, almost in permanence. And that's the ideal situation, because when you are launching your newest product, you want Google to pick it up like on the spot, immediately, and not like after 2 months. You can force that. There's 2 tools you should probably keep in mind when talking about SEO. It's Google, it's changed names, Webmaster Tools. Yeah, Search Console, yeah. Well, if you look at Google Webmaster Tools or Google Search Console, it's now called Search Console. That's the first one you need, console. It'll tell you a lot about this, about readability and technical mistakes. The second one is, second interesting Belgian startup, by the way, is WooRank, which you just type in your URL and it gives you a full analysis of your website. The only disadvantage is you can only do that once. So, and what I used to do was click open all the tips, because they have all the tips, and then print it as a PDF, and then I had a document. But I recently tried that again, but it's not working anymore. They came up with something there. So what you probably do is look where you score bad, click open the comment, make a screenshot, stick it into a keynote or something, and then you have your little to-do list you can discuss with your, well, you can either solve yourself or discuss with somebody who's building your website. Or if you're using this regularly, you could get a subscription on WooRank. Okay, that's about SEO. Next step is going to be the decision moment, but I propose we take a 10-minute break. Be back at 3:45. Is that okay? By the way, you can always ask questions. I know I'm a fast talker and I keep talking, so ask questions whenever you want. So people have realized they have a problem, they've been looking for a solution, and gradually they're moving towards a decision. Gradually they're thinking like, hey, I might just buy something, and then that's at the end of this exploration phase, and then they'll like say, okay, yes, now I'm going for it. And that's this first moment of truth I talked about earlier. And here people simply are looking for the easiest way. We're kind of lazy, so we're looking for the easy way. That's why retail is often not so fascinating. I mean, there's no fun into going into most of the retail channels. They're just there to provide you as efficiently as possible with the product you are looking for. Now, that's also their danger, because now it's getting more and more easy to get your stuff online. So the question you have to ask yourself is, where will people buy? And I'm convinced that for most products, there is an opportunity to sell online. Not always. There are probably still some products that will always be sold in a physical context. Although there are not many left, if you ask me. So a lot of sales is going to happen online, but the question is also, where does the decision happen? And if you're selling a big B2B product, well, then there might be a last step, a contract signing, that will not be online. And these, depending on the business you're in, these two worlds, the online and the offline world, are like influencing each other. There's the physical world with and the online world that are clicking into one another. If you want a book now, if you want my book now, somebody was asking. If you want my book now, you can go down, cross the street, go into Standard Boekhandel. It's probably there. Or you can ask me, I have some in my car. So that's physical retail. If you're like, I want that book, but I mean, I want it quick, but it's not like it doesn't matter whether it's now or tomorrow, then you can probably better buy it online. They'll deliver it at home. You can order it now and buy it online, buy it and have it delivered at home. So physical and digital are mixing, because you may also say, okay, I'm looking for that book now. So where can I buy it? And then you will use digital tools, Google Maps or whatever, to find a bookstore close by. So digital tools will drive traffic to physical locations. But physical locations may also be the preparation for a digital sale. So if you go into, let's say, well, people are doing more and more showrooming. So they go into the store, they enjoy the experience, and then afterwards they buy online. If they're buying online with the same company they were doing the showrooming in, that's great. If you're doing the showrooming in your shop and then they're buying at somebody else online, that's not so good. So these two, you have to carefully think about that. Where does that decision happen, and how can I be there? And again, I think for most of you, online is going to be crucial. So it also means that your own, or the channel you're selling through, is going to be probably your website, and conversion is going to be crucial. So I've learned in the meantime that conversion is not always very known as a word. Conversion simply means, especially in this case, it's the moment. Conversion does not always have to be a sale. That's what I wanted to say. People come to your site and they kind of decide maybe for a first time to engage with you. And that first time engagement, that very simple conversion could be they're watching your corporate movie for 30 seconds, or they're staying on your website for 2 minutes. Those are very light conversions. You don't have too much from that because you don't know you know who it is. You just know in your Google Analytics, hey, so many people stayed for more than 2 minutes. Not very valuable, but it could be, in some cases, in extreme business-to-business environments, sometimes that is already something. Now, it could be like 2 minutes. It could be, no, they're like 10 minutes on the site and they've checked plus more than 10 pages. That's already a bit more. That's a bit more of a conversion. And at a certain point, the main point you want to reach is where you can identify your visitor. That's typically people ask a question, or they subscribe for a newsletter, or they simply leave their address, or they register on your site for more information. So here, that's really an important jump you make in the process. That's when they go to leaving behind something that identifies them. Most of the time that would be an email address. It could also be a mobile phone number. Those are the two main indicators of your personality. It's your email address, as an advantage that an email address, you can check whether it works before you actually accept the registration. But people can have multiple email addresses, so it's not always a one-on-one identifier. A mobile phone number is even better. That's even stronger. It's very personal, but before you can convince somebody to give their mobile phone number, you really need something, very special. So as of a moment, it's identifying. There's like different levels. It could be simply subscribing to a newsletter, or it could be ask a question, or it could be registering for an account. All of that are conversions, but one is more worthy than another. And then at a certain point, you cross a next step, and that is when people actually buy. The whole purpose of your website if the conversion happens on your website, or if the sale can happen on your website, is to get as fast as possible to that buying moment. But again, don't forget these three, or this level, this zone, where people just simply identify themselves, because with new tools like marketing automation, for instance, you actually, if somebody leaves behind, if they register for a newsletter, for instance, at that moment, you know, your marketing automation software knows, okay, this email address is linked to this IP address, or this, well, it's not even IP address anymore, but this to this visitor, and they can track back to where you were, or where the visitor was, or you can track back to where your visitor was before he or she registered his email address. So it's not just that you know who it is, but you know also part of the history of visiting your site. And that can tell you a lot about what kind of person it is. Is it B2B, B2C? What is he or she interested in? You can already start enriching your database. What I'm describing here is quite advanced. That's marketing automation tools, identifying your customer, doing stuff with that. That's an advanced strategy. But it's important that even if you're not using marketing automation and that kind of tools, that you build in your head a kind of hierarchy. If the only way to engage with you is by buying your product, you will miss a lot of customers. You want to give them the opportunity to signal, like, hey, I'm interested in your company, and you want to probably also keep track of those who do not signal yet, but you know, like, oh, I'm getting more interested people on my site, or I'm getting less interested people on my site. They're staying longer or less long. That's a whole story, and you could write a book about making your website conversion-oriented. That's going to require a lot of testing. So conversion-oriented being like every path or most paths on your site should lead to a moment of conversion, a moment of sale by preference. That will be the goal of that part of your website. It could also be, it means, for instance, I don't know how many startups we've already had, say e-commerce startups, or who sell something, and then you start with a very nice little corporate movie that explains why you're doing what you're doing, because you learn that the why is important. Don't do that. You're on a website. People are, when they're on the website, they're either at the end of your exploration phase or at a decision moment. They're there, and they're there to buy. And so you want to show the products you're selling immediately. If you go to Amazon.com, there's not first a message from Jeff Bezos explaining how cool his company is. No. You're like, buy this stuff here and now. It's getting very commercial at that point. I mean, it's like entering a store. Your website, if it's conversion oriented, it's like entering a store. If you go into the Meer, all the doors are open, and there is none of them that has like a small entry where you first have to watch a movie before you can enter their store. That doesn't work like that. That's also not the way it works on a website. This is also the moment where email marketing or email starts getting important, specifically for this reason, because this is the moment where customers identify themselves. So email marketing might be interesting just to keep track of who's interested, but also if you're doing a real e-commerce, for instance, for people who, they call it abandoned cart software. If you're using abandoned cart software, so software that tracks like, okay, people have put something in their shopping cart, but they did not continue until buying it, then you get there's software. There's even add-on software you can just plug into your websites afterwards, apart from your e-commerce tool. That's after a specific amount of time, sends an email to your customer saying, or your potential customer, hey, you left something in your in-basket, maybe you want to buy it now, we'll give you a voucher for free shipping, or get a 3% discount if you buy it still today, things like that. So that's also a way of using email marketing to, again, work towards conversion, to work towards sales. Social media could be interesting here, but I'm more of a fan of saying, like, in some cases you can use social media, but don't overdo it, because the goal is not to create a cool bond with your customer. You just want them to buy. Again, another example of that is of conversion orientedness is if you go onto a good e-commerce website and you click the not to buy, so add to basket and then afrekenen, what do they say, checkout. So you go to checkout, then all of a sudden you'll see everything disappear. You're like, in the most extreme cases, you're in like a white desert. There's no, not even, sometimes they even take away the logo. You're just like, the only thing you can do is fill in the form, credit card, delivery, and then delivery information, and then checkout, and then they say, now you can go shopping again, but you've paid. Okay, so that's where you want to go to. That's here we're the channels we're talking about is mainly the website or mobile environment, and conversion is going to be crucial there. So once the sale is done, you could say that service after sales becomes actually service before the next sale. Steve Van Bellem has a quote. He says, being nice to the people is the most underestimated marketing strategy. And that's what you want to do. You have customers here and they've just bought your product, and this is not where it stops. When I built the first website, I worked at Samsonite. We had a department called Service After Sales, and all the marketing and sales people were in the fancy blue building in front of the factory, and then Service After Sales was somewhere in the warehouse behind the factory, because like, broken suitcases, you don't want to talk about that. Whereas engaging with people about your product is actually very valuable, especially as a startup, but also as a big company. Samsung did that quite well, actually. Used a lot of stories, because if you get a broken suitcase, it's usually like, yeah, I've been using it for 25 years and it finally broke. Can you still repair the wheel? Yes. Oh, I'm so happy. Well, that's a good story. That's the kind of stories you want. And that's also the kind of stories you want to collect. And you probably in the beginning will get also some negative stories, but you will learn about that from your customers about how to improve your product. So take that opportunity, engage with your customer. That's why we also call it the second moment of truth. So people, the zero moment was exploring, the first moment was buying, and now they're using your product. You're under the shower with that new shampoo. It smells good. I mean, if you would have your smartphone on you, you would say like, hey, make a selfie and say, this is great shampoo, in another situation. So try and grab that moment. In two ways. There's the positive way. There's unfortunately also the negative way. If you have unhappy customers, well, you would want to forget about them, but you will have to help them. And there's no other way. You do not want to let negative comments linger around. And you'll also see that people are nicer than you think. There are things like trolls, people who just like being negative all the time. You just, well, try and get rid of them. Don't feed them. Don't start discussing. Just try and get them away as soon as possible in a polite way. But the biggest share of your customers will obviously, hopefully, be positive. And the ones that have a negative experience, solve it and turn it into something positive. I have the experience also with an e-commerce site where somebody like writes a comment like, oh yeah, I'm totally worried. My product is, I haven't heard from you, and I tried to call the company and I couldn't get contact. And then you answer like, hi, well, can you give me your email address? We'll talk about the order number, we'll sort it out. You sort it out, and then like 1 week later, I see that the comment had disappeared from the Facebook page, and the person sent me a personal note saying, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't want that to be negative for your company. So just because you helped, I didn't ask to take away the comment, they did it themselves. So you can do a lot just by being nice to the people. And then hopefully most of the people are happy, and that's an opportunity for conversation and content creation. Content marketing, content has come up, and if we still have the time, I'll go a bit deeper into it still today. But you want to create content, you want to create stories. Well, your customers are the perfect place, happy customers are the perfect place to start a conversation and create content. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It can be Now take the example if you're having a travel agency and then somebody writes on your on your Facebook page, hey, we had a great trip, thanks. Then you don't wait 24 hours before liking that. You just like it immediately. It's not difficult. You just have to be a bit organized. You just do a like. Or you could do a like and say like, hey, write a small comment. Say like, oh, I hope your trip to Tanzania was great. Or I'm happy your trip to Tanzania turned out great. And then you can start doing content creation by asking you, would you happen to have some nice pictures? Can you share them with us? We would like to share them with other people. Or I remember you were a great movie maker. Maybe you made a movie. So you're like engaging with your customer. If it's in a B2B context, it's a bit more difficult. You will go and have to go and interview that person. But these are really the starting point for a lot of content creation. Content that you can share on social media. Content you can share on the website. Your own website, but that would be a different part then, not the e-commerce part, but like a more service and content-oriented part of your website. And you can use it for all those famous email newsletters you want to send. This is where you send newsletters. People who have actively said, yes, I want to be informed by you about your product. People who have given consent, not something you got somewhere in a dodgy way. No, you want to build a relationship. That's why you use email marketing. And that content can be a part of that. And that brings us to the end of the customer journey. So, latent or active need, use PR, public channels, interruption channels, etc. to make people know that they actually have a need. Then help them in their exploration phase. Think about it. It's an exercise I've been doing many times with many startups, but also with corporates. Like just figure out my customer. Where is he or she looking for the solution I'm offering? What blogs? Is it on LinkedIn? Is it on Facebook? Is it on Google? What are they using? Then where does the decision happen? Am I doing that as optimal as possible? Am I taking away all the barriers? And then, okay, am I taking enough care of my existing customers so they can influence other people in their exploration phase or themselves when the need pops up again? Now, you've done that analysis. Actually, in practice, what you'll see is when you do the analysis, we usually write it on a big board and then write next to each phase what channels are interesting and where the ideas pop up. And there's a spontaneous thing. You'll feel it yourself, like, okay, this is where we have most opportunities. This is where we are still weak, and this is where we have to strengthen. One thing that's typical, one thing that's typical for a startup, and I'm going to skip a few slides here because what's typical for a startup is that you have nothing of that whole customer journey, or you maybe have a bit of a website, but that's about it. So if you're starting from scratch, you will have to, so the question will be, where do we start? I'll get back to that in a second. If you already have a specific, if you think like, hey, my marketing is already somewhere, let's see, then it's more like a question, what are my goals? If your goals are, I'm launching a new product on the market, but like a new version, then you'll have to start working on those needs. If you're like, hey, I'm selling solar panels, everybody sells them, but but I know people are looking for them, then you'll have to fight for your place in this exploration phase. If it's more like a conversion problem, you'll have to focus on that. And if it's like, hey, we're relaxed, we're selling, but I don't think any of you is in that situation, but okay, let's assume one day you'll be there. You could say like, hey, now I have to really focus on this phase. This is probably the last phase most startups will have to focus on. But at a certain moment you get customers and you get one, and then you have 10, and you have 50 and 100 and 1,000 customers. Well, then you have to start working on this part as well. If we look at what's leveraging, what's happening today in digital marketing, because what I was talking about earlier is that's a framework. There are three things that are popular or important today. It's content, it's mobile, and it's growth marketing. I don't have time to go in detail on all of them, but I'm going to pick out a number of slides that that I've already referred to and will give you an insight or further insight in developing your strategy. First question is, well, when you're talking about conversation marketing and conversation, it's always about content. And the good thing is, as a startup, you have this authenticity. As an entrepreneur, you're striving for a vision and not simply some target, some marketing director has pushed onto you. You're really working from a true authentic vision, and that authenticity is really crucial. And then we're back at Simon Sinek's golden circle. If you know why you're doing things, how and what, then you can map that to the relevant phases in this customer journey. And this is how I map them together. So in these, especially here in this early phase, you're going to be talking about very broad subjects and questions your customers are busy with. You're going to make them feel like, hey, this brand is kind of cool, or this company is kind of cool. They seem to know all about this specific problem that you are solving. So you're setting yourself out an image of a company that knows why they are here and how they are going to solve that problem. It's like, yeah. So the focus here will be on your why. So when you're talking about Facebook, when you're talking about the most extreme example of this is the 1984 TV spot from Apple. I don't know if anybody remembers that, or you must have seen it. Just as a description, see this big room with a kind of dictator, special type of guy on screen yelling at all the same looking individuals in the room, and then through the middle corridor, so they're all in bluish, grayish, same clothes, and then a blonde woman runs in, all in white clothes, sports clothes, and she throws a huge hammer into the screen, and the screen kind of explodes, I think, and then it says, "Apple, think different." Apple think, what are you guys selling? Well, they could do that. They were already quite popular, but they were just saying, we think different. That's simply what we do. There's another spot where they say we are they show all the famous people in the history who have done great things like Einstein and whatever. And they also say we think different. That's the extreme case of bringing your why message. Will you be able to do that on day one? No, but you can take that type of thinking when you're developing your tone of voice for your Facebook page. Don't always talk about what you are selling. Talk about why you are doing the things that you're doing. And in case of a startup, it can be very much more personal. It can be like, hey, we're extremely enthusiastic. We worked the night through. We went to this fair. We've been there. Always explaining what you've learned, what you've seen, why you are doing the things that you have been doing. You can become a thought leader here without actually delivering that much. You're just talking about why you are doing the things. And what will happen is people who follow you, who read this, they'll start asking themselves questions like, yeah, that's right. I see. Yeah, maybe I do have a problem with X, Y, or Z. And then they'll start looking for solutions. And that's why in these channels, when you're talking about search engine optimization, when you're talking about your own website in a certain point, when you're talking about your own blog, when you're explaining where people will end up when they're exploring, this is where you'll give answers. You'll answer the questions you've raised here. This is the typical 5 ways to optimize the conversion on your website. If you're building a conversion optimization tool, then that's typically these blog posts that will pop up. You'll give the answers, and you'll give answers that are not exclusively oriented towards your own solution, but it'll be like 4 of them will be interesting, and the 5th one will be your product, typically. So don't focus too much on yourself yet. It's only by the end, when they end up on your blog, for instance, that you will start promoting yourself a bit more. And then you make a switch. They come to your site and they're interested in buying. And this is where you tell what you are selling. This is like, okay, this is what we are doing. Here is the product, buy it now. So it's like, because, so you're on the, that's why I said about half an hour ago, I think, when you come onto the site and it's a conversion-oriented site, you don't, somewhere on the site there will be why you are doing things, but it will not be on the homepage. Because when people have gone through this whole journey and they end up on your website, they probably just want to buy if you're actually selling something. And then when you go back as customers, it'll be a mixture. Some customers will still be interested in learning about new products you have to offer. But a lot of these, like I have a BMW, so I get this BMW magazine, and they tell stories about traveling and driving around and the BMW experience, which is logical because BMW has as a slogan, sheer driving pleasure. It's interesting how car manufacturers, BMW has a baseline that's, I think that's the right way to go, that's based on the why. They say driving is fun, so we are offering sheer driving pleasure. Audi is a bit more here. Audi says, I don't know what it is in English, in German it is Vorsprung durch Technik. I don't know what that would be in German. Voorsprong door techniek in Dutch. What would that be in English? I don't know, something. But that's more like how they are different. They say like, you know, we're technically we're better. So that's why if you're having a doubt, you should buy an Audi because that's where we are different. And then there's Opel or Volkswagen who have Das Auto. We make cars. Cool. Okay, cool. But that's when you hear. So that's cool. Good to know that you make cars. But it's not going to inspire me. So think about messages. And then connect it to buyers, to the people. Buyer persona. There'll be a lot of people talking to you about persona, but you're trying to get into the head of your customer and understanding how he or she thinks. So you have these 3, 4, 5 stereotypes, you could almost call them, of the type of customers you're working with, and you're trying to find out what problem am I solving for this customer. I have a number, and you'll get these handouts, by the way. For each buyer persona, you'll ask yourself a number of questions. Like, first is, what problems is this person confronted with in his day-to-day business? And what triggers her to go and look for solutions? And what are barriers? Why would she not go for a specific solution? And what proof points can I put next to that? If you do this brainstorming exercise with your team, you can spend a day on it. With all these questions, you'll end up with 50 to 100 relevant themes. Actually, you could call them subjects that you can use for your content marketing. And they could be future tweets, future blog posts you write, and a number of them could fit together into a white paper, and it's actually a very good basis to start your own content plan. And if you're really out of inspiration, just for fun, go to, and you have to look it up, it's called Portent's Content Idea Generator. You just fill in here what the subject is and refresh, and then it just generates blog post articles as you go. It's fun to do, but it's also interesting to see because they give tips. They say 13 great articles about Facebook followers, could be anything. So numbered lists are, well, to our frustration sometimes maybe, but they work. People read numbered lists. You don't have to do everything yourself. You can say these are 13 articles about, so I mean, you don't have to write everything yourself. Just find 5, 10 articles and then make a blog post about that. And then there's some jokes in there too. But if you refresh, you get a new title. It's kind of fun, but it gives you an idea and some inspiration. Now, one more. Where are the fish? Well, there's a famous marketing expression that says, fish where the fish are. And where are the fish today? Well, the fish are everything. They are mobile. As you're all hip startups and you're all completely mobile, you're totally the mobile generation. I'm not going to go over the numbers and how important mobile is and how all of that works. But I do know that it changes people's behavior. this is not socially accepted in our family. But if I have not even a laptop would work, but a tablet, that can work, which is kind of strange because a tablet is the same as a computer. An e-reader for sure works, but a smartphone is not accepted. So, all these devices, you have to think about that. Different devices have different impacts on our lives and the way we think. There was a time when we thought this was going to be the device of the future, but in the meantime, who has a smartwatch? And who has a smartwatch and is not wearing it anymore? Two. Let's say we all thought that, or 3 years ago, we all thought that if I would have done this exercise today, but and a prediction of 4 years ago would have been like 80% of the people will wear smartwatches. You're probably wearing it because of sports. So smartwatches are not what they lived up to be. So it shows that even the biggest companies in the world can be wrong. They're not gone, the smartwatches, but they're having to reinvent them. Something else that is growing is, and that is working is, and that seems to be working, is speech. So it's not feeling, it's speech. We have Alexa, but in the meantime, Google has Google Home. Apple has something similar going on. Apple has these, kind of interesting. People rarely mention them, but the earbuds, the AirPods, they're really great. They look odd, I know. They look strange. I look like an idiot, but they're fantastic. But it means that I can walk through the street and ask Siri, Siri, what time is it? Siri, how long until I get to the Boerentoren? Siri, when is it going to start raining? All these things work. So voice as an interface seems to be working. So maybe one of you guys is working on a voice-operated thing. There's also API economy. I wanted to show these because I'm still waiting for the first startup that builds a skill for the Amazon Echo. Because there's actually an open API. You can build your own skill that says Alexa, what is the battery level of my life power? Or Alexa, I don't know, I'm thinking of examples of the people I know in the room. It's too difficult. But so, hooking into these new things, that would be my bet now, talking light artificial intelligence. However, the most important impact to me is that this customer journey we've been talking about until now, is being atomized. Until now, when I explained that customer journey, I did that you saw the 4 very nice blocks. Like people are going from one step to the next step to the next step to the next step, and then they come back. Now what you'll see in practice is, and you can feel that also, that's not the way people work. When I say that my daughter has done her research before she goes buying shampoo, it's not that she sat in front of her computer for an hour just before entering the delays. That's not how it worked. What really happened is that over the past weeks and months and maybe even years, she's been going through that cycle without buying. They're like, hey, yeah, and I'll probably need shampoo at a certain point. Yeah. And then she'll be browsing around and looking for good shampoos that don't hurting her colored hair. And then at a certain point, she'll drop into she'll be confronted with somebody on YouTube talking about how animal testing, and and she'll go through that cycle and maybe come to your website and at a certain point, but decide not to engage yet. And then the next time it's like, maybe this is kind of a good product. I should leave my email address behind, and I go through it again. And it'll probably take 8 to 10 or even more times of people to come to be confronted with your brand before actually jumping, making the click here on the bottom right side of your customer journey being the conversion moment. So for explaining a customer journey, it's good to cut it into 4 nice blocks, but in practice, people don't live in 4 nice blocks. And with the arrival of all these always-on digital media, those 4 blocks, you could still describe them. That's probably how it was 10 years ago. You realize you have a question. You come home, you go to your office where you switch on your desktop computer, you surf to Google and put in a question, and then maybe the next week decide to go and buy it, etc. That's also not how it happens today. And that cycle I was describing is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, shorter and shorter and shorter. What happens now is that you're thinking like, well, I'll describe it with real life examples. I have to think. I think if you would say 4 or 5 years ago, buying something online on a smartphone would have been like, nah, people are not going to do that. The websites were not optimized for mobile. These smartphones were way smaller. Now they have bigger screens, but then you wouldn't do that. So, but then at a certain moment, it was 3 years ago, I was doing a trip, bit of an adventure travel, and I needed a USB plug for my, you put in the cigarette lighter to charge my phone. So I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm thinking like, yeah, I still need that. I need to buy that, yeah. And I'm like, okay, what do? I take my smartphone, I open Evernote, I write down I have to buy a USB plug and then set an alarm for the next morning. Or just as fast, just go on to Coolblue and buy it and order it. And I mean, it just takes about the same time. That was 3 years ago, and I was kind of surprised. Then, so since then, like 4 years ago, I said like, well, online buying, people are not going to do that. 3 years ago, well, small things people might buy online. And then this phone I bought on my other smartphone. That's like 800 euros thing I bought on my iPhone. I bought a new iPhone. So that story of people don't buy online anymore. And now we're like, I kind of get frustrated when I'm on my smartphone and I'm on a website that doesn't work perfectly to buy online, which means that you can be on the bus, you can be in a traffic jam, you could be anywhere, you could be in your bed, you could, at any given moment, you can buy through your smartphone. Or with the Amazon Echo, you can walk through the kitchen and say, well, not in Belgium yet, but or you can add something to your shopping list. Or in the US, you can say, Alexa, buy a fresh, whatever you need. It'll groceries, it'll just order. As you walk through the kitchen, you don't have to do anything. That means that this customer journey is, rather than these big discrete blocks or these like chunks, it's really becoming a kind of all very, very small moments where you have to be present with your startup. So, yeah.
Has the B2B business and the decision cycle of businesses gone through the same revolution? Has that changed?
It's probably less. It's probably less, but it's even in B2B. My experience is that even in B2B, it follows that same logic. People will decide on the spot. They'll go onto LinkedIn and check who you are, what your company is about. They'll do research on Google. They'll ask Siri questions about your company. So it's probably slower, but that's more because the processes before were slower already too. So it's like, I think you could say we had this same amount of acceleration, it's just that the starting point was already a lot slower. In B2B, these steps would have been probably quite exact, like, okay, we realize and discuss we have a need. We ask somebody to explore the market and see what it is and then take a decision. But nowadays, I mean, this CEO also has LinkedIn or also can do a search for a specific solution. So when he's in an airport wasting time, he'll probably also, so it'll also go faster there. So I had this great animation to explain all of what I explained a second ago. So it's an atomized customer journey. It's really all these little chunks where you have to be present, and it's going to have, and it's not making marketing easier. I mean, I would love to go back to marketing. Remember the funnel where we say like, hey, let's talk to a lot of people and probably a lot will buy. That's not the way it works anymore. And it's probably the way it never worked like that, but we made ourselves think it was like that. This is probably closer to reality. So think about how are you going to capture and harvest those. Google has I stole those from Google, and you'll see it's a bit of publicity for them. But they call them, they have a number of slogans. They say, be there. Just first thing, be present. And in your need phases, like this was about travel, the example of travel, like I want to get away moments. You're like, well, we have had nice weather now over the past weeks, but you say like, I'm tired, I want to get away. That's when you want to be there on that smartphone. You want to be there on that Google Home or on Alexa with answers if you're selling trips. Or when people are exploring and making plans, you want to be there. If people want to book, I think Google Flights, the website, great website for finding flights. 60% of the visitors to Google Flights are on mobile. So, I mean, if you're not on mobile, forget about it. Or can't wait to explore, you're at a specific location, you want to be there, you want to be present. And you just do not just want to be present, you also want to be present in a very useful way. Just being there is not enough. Being present could be with Google Ads. This is an example of a Google ad that is done by Red Roof. Yeah, Red Roof Hotels. They had an API scanning, or they were scanning an API for flight delays. And if a flight was delayed overnight, they would identify that and they say, okay, Chicago O'Hare, flights cancelled overnight. They would launch an ad campaign that says, flight cancelled, Red Roof has you covered with rooms only 3 miles away. Geolocated for people in the airport, in and around the airport, and how close they can get. So they're present on mobile with a button that says book a reservation. So extremely useful. You're sitting there, you're looking like, oh damn, flight cancelled. Okay, it's not a very European example, I know, but still. And it just has a button here like, okay, reservation, Red Roof, sounds good, let's book something. And thirdly, be quick. This is interesting because I started my career on the internet, like in '96, with my desktop computer I brought from home and a modem, 56 modem. You guys don't know that. You had to plug that in the fax line because that was the only one that was not going through the PC, the centrale of the company. So then websites were slow. You were waiting for websites. But somewhere along the way we got Telenet and Belgacom and DSL and stuff like that. So sites are blazingly fast now, or connections are fast. Now we're entering in a new era again. That is that what I typically say is you're waiting for the bus. You can see the bus coming. And you think like, hey, yeah, I still have to book. I still have to buy something online. Like, well, the bus is only 500. It's still 500 meters away. I'll go online and buy something. You know, that's how people think. If you're like thinking, okay, I'm buying now. I want to buy now, and you only have a minute left. Waiting 3 seconds. That's like, in percentage, how much is that? 3 out of 6 seconds. 10% of your minute, that's gone. So it would have been 3 seconds is 5% of your time wasted. That's how people are thinking today. We're like in such a fast atomized world. So you want to eliminate any step. Like it's a smartphone. Don't ask people where they are. They are holding a smartphone with a GPS built in. Anticipate on needs, and load and response times are entering in a kind of new era now, where speed is extremely important. So people have changed. Are you ready to harvest their digital reflexes? That's the question. Last point I want to come to is tell you something about growth, and not really growth hacking. I don't know if there's a session about growth hacking, but one thing is, not all marketing is growth marketing. You don't have to do growth marketing, but I guess as a startup you want to grow faster, so you'll have to do growth marketing. And the first question is, are you ready for that growth? Are you ready? So an old slogan is, the best way to kill a bad product is a good marketing campaign. So you're going to have to balance between an MVP that's like good enough to put out in the market, but that is not bad, so bad it can destroy your image. It's going to be a balancing exercise. But if you do good marketing and you have a bad product, it could mean the end of your company. Something I was talking about the IDA and the funnel previously. What we see here in a startup world is that the way of choosing your priorities is different. Traditional marketeers have the funnel the other way around. As a startup, you're flipping the funnel, and if you ask me where you have to start with your marketing, spontaneously, suppose typically you start with a blank sheet. You're not really doing any marketing yet. So where do you start? And that we see number 1 here, so we probably have to start here. Well, what I've learned, I've also learned that in working with startups, is that as a startup, you have to start working here. It's a bit against your... a marketeer hates it, but he'll have to admit, and my marketer's heart also bleeds a bit when I say I'm starting here, because I first want to build the right image, I want to attract people, I want to build the right brand, and then we're going to start selling, and it's going to be a nice story, and the whole theory of branding and people having the right perception of it. It's so nice, it's so beautiful, it has a theoretical beauty to it, and it may work, and it probably works in traditional companies, but as a startup, you don't have time for all that crap. So this is where you start, and it means that you start where the sales is being made. You start by convincing the first customer, the second customer, the third customer, and then the fifth, and then the 10th. And then, depending on the type of business, your 10th or your thousandth customer, then it's only, so when you know that this works, you know that this conversion moment works, when you know that this is at a good enough level, it's only then that you will go a bit higher or a bit back into the customer journey and start attracting people, start finding low-hanging fruit again. I'll give you an example in a minute. And then again later, you'll go to the need phase and you'll start doing the philosophy. From a planning point of view, from a strategic point of view, you have to consider all the parts, but in the action, this is where it starts and then it goes back. And I especially learned that when working with Onak, the foldable canoe, which are shipping this week, by the way, finally. But what we found there is that on a small scale, working with people where the chance of a conversion, or the chance that they would buy is the highest, that's where you get the fastest results. And you want to get results fast, so you can learn. People say, if it doesn't work, if people don't buy, then you can quickly find out why are they not buying, Then you learn, you adapt, and then when you see, okay, they're starting to buy, okay, so this is good. And Onak did that by a lot of demos, asking people, this was a pre-crowdfunding campaign, asking people to register for their email address, doing even pre-sales before the Kickstarter campaign, to get to know why are people interested, will they buy, is our website okay, will they convert, and then it's only once you know that you can go back into the funnel and start looking for low-hanging fruit, looking for people who are very likely to convert. In their case, people living in cities with a lot of water, because the aim, and that was a strategy here, is okay, you want to escape. We were looking for people who typically have a stressed city life, typically, and don't have a lot of space. So they live in a city, small apartment. You cannot put a canoe in an apartment, but you still want to escape into nature. Canoe is the best thing to do that. So you look for New York, or packed cities with water. New York is not very good because the Hudson is a bit too big, but still. Then you can do advertising towards those people, so you gradually move up front. So I was recently talking to another startup, marketing guy also, and he said, yeah, it's good that you repeat that, because once stuff starts going, We are all inclined to say like, hey, yeah, let's do big advertising. You get some funding, let's do big advertising. Yeah, well, at a certain point you may have to do that, but just make sure this part works and then that part works, and then you can go to that part. And your brand, you know, you could even, as long as you're here, you can even change your name afterwards. Most, well, it's a bit of a disease. It's also logical. You start by inventing a name for your company, and then you think you found it, and then, you know, like for 3 months you've been working on that and studies. And well, my advice is don't put too much effort in it in the first 3 months of your company. Just, you know, if after 6 months you still don't have a name, you may start to want to hurry a bit, but in the beginning, just start selling. Try to sell it, give it a name, doesn't matter. And then when you see it starts working, then you can still write a little email to the people. Hey, this is our new name, good news. We have a new website too. This is our new corporate identity. Now we can start investing, because this is where you can get fast results. This is where you get results on the long term.
One question.
Yeah.
So if you start with step 3, where you start to attract people that are making a decision, are you changing the channel as well? Or should you still hold on to the old channels you were mentioning before?
Your website will be crucial. It depends on what you do, but the channel here is your own website, or e-com is really where the sale happens. Depending where you, first question is, where does the decision happen? Does it happen on your website? Then your website is going to be the crucial part there. And anything that's like closely linked to it. SEO. Some companies just survive only on a good e-commerce site and wonderful SEO. Huh? Just that, nothing more. It's not the most sexy, fascinating thing to do. It's a very technical thing to do. But it can work. If you're bringing a lifestyle product, that's probably not a good idea. But if you're solving a true, you know, pushing problem, that's the ideal way. Just people will go look for it anyway on Google. You make sure you score good, make sure they go to your website and convert immediately. So then it's that plus SEO, nothing more. Focusing is also always a good idea. I have a few slides about. Yeah, maybe I'll throw those in just to. But feel free to ask a question. What's happening? Oh, okay. Growth marketing or growth hacking is a popular subject. I kind of like it. Done a lot of discussions about it, read a lot about it. What I don't like about growth hacking is that it's too often going towards fooling the system. We're trying to find a trick that works once and we have a huge success with it. Now, the chance you find something like that is rather small. What I believe we can learn from growth hacking is that, again, not only traditional marketeers, all marketeers, we tend to have we tend to forget how important technology is. And how startups think differently. Traditional companies think, and that's what we learn, think in terms of we have a market. So marketing is the 4 Ps. So we have a product department, we have a pricing department, we have a distribution or a sales department, and we have a communications, the promotion department. And startup is with 4 people, then they already start splitting up all of those responsibilities. That's not the way to go, because if you look at real startups, you'll see like this, for instance, Airbnb. You can ask yourselves the question. What is the product? Is it the website? Is it the app? It's not the rooms because they're not their rooms. Is it their back office? You cannot answer that question. So if you would say, so let's assume, say, okay, the app or the website of Airbnb that's their product. Okay, so how is their pricing strategy then? And how is it separate from the website or from the app? Well, it's not. It's part of the app, okay? And how do they promote? What's their communication strategy? Well, it's basically also the app. So the app is property of the communications department. No, it's owned by the product department. And you can feel that those traditional splits, that they don't work anymore. And that's the same goes, for instance, for Spotify. And just try and figure out what's the product that Spotify is offering. Is it the music? Is it the playlists? Is it the app? Is it the streaming? What is it? Well, you don't know. And I think that's what makes startups so disruptive. That is that you combine things. You guys wake up in the morning and before 9 o'clock you're answering maybe questions from customers, and between 9 and 12 you're working on new features for your product, and maybe you learn those new features or you came up with those features because you were answering customer questions before noon, and afternoon you're doing this AdWords campaign based on the new products or new features you've been thinking about previously. So it's in your head, it's in a small team, and you combine these disciplines, these different disciplines as part of your marketing mix. And that's what a lot of traditional companies have forgotten, and where you can beat them we can actually beat them because they think product, price, promotion, place. You can throw all of that together, be agnostic of those silos, and try and bring everything together. Make price your battle horse, or make communications part of your company. Coca-Cola did a very nice job, and they're trying to copy it. It's not working that good this year, I have the impression, but you remember the Coke campaign with the names, people's names on the cans and on the bottles. They were actually using the product as a carrier for communication, and actually they're doing that now. They're putting destinations on it. So can you imagine the political hassle they must have had, because the product department and the packaging department all of a sudden had to work together with the advertising and communication department. Can you imagine the discussions about budget, because they're used to buying X gazillion in media budget at Coca-Cola, and all of a sudden they're buying media space on their own little bottles. So I don't know, but I think it must have been a huge discussion, and I congratulate them for it, because they've managed to short circuit two things there, and it's congratulations to a big company, but you as a startup have to be able to do that like every day. You short circuit the things you do. And one way of short-circuiting that, well, I sometimes call it growth hacking. And then the growth hacking skills, or the skills you need to bring together, are threefold. It's that obviously of a marketeer, but that's the easy part. That's just knowing a bit about your customers and people, or how people think. You have to be analytical. When I described the process and I said each time you have to test, measure, and adapt, well, it means you have to measure. You have to, and it's not enough to say, yes, I look every month at my Google Analytics. No. It's about what sold when, where, how do people use my product. So especially if you have a digital product, it could even go into big data. So it is a lot of analytical work, and you can do almost marketing in a scientific way, and prove, like he could have come up with a great creative idea about how can we sell more, and she can measure that and actually say, yes, you were almost right, but I discovered that if you do it like that, it will be better. And then doing it like that, you'll probably need somebody who can actually develop stuff and who understands technology. So you need a bit of that as a developer. You need somebody with technical skills. Also in the team, or ideally, if you can do it all yourself, or if you can find somebody who can combine those three, that's ideal. Now, honestly, there are very few who combine those three. So I think it's a safer strategy to try and make a team that combines those three things. It means that your developer can, actually build something that the marketeer has come up with. But still, this marketeer has to understand a bit about technology. You have to know as a marketeer what an API is. Now, it's not complicated, but you have to know what it is. Who knows what an API is? Okay, majority here. That's good. If you don't know, look it up. But if I ask it in traditional marketing, then I usually start explaining it, because it's like 1 out of 50 who knows what an API is. But APIs allow you to do cool stuff and gives you a vision. It's more about, and it's not, you don't necessarily have to use APIs as such, but you have to understand enough about technology to come up with ideas that are, disruptive, that are different. So the growth hacker is typically in the middle. So, but if you have the ideal marketing team, so it would be composed of the analyst, who is in charge of testing, measuring and improving, measuring constantly, focusing also on metrics like customer acquisition cost and customer retention costs, and comparing that to lifetime value. So the cost of acquiring a new customer plus the cost of retaining that customer over the years should be lower than the value, the lifetime value of your customer, the value he brings to you, how much you can earn from that person. So that's the analytical part. So, and it's just a few small things here. We have the techie who knows about APIs, but also who knows about rapid prototyping, who can like make a banner, make a small application, small form, throw something in, automate stuff quickly to like try things and see what happens. It's also your access to incredibly useful information sources. Again, there's databases on the web, there's information on the web readily available and that you can use in your applications. It's for free, you just need to know how to access it. Scraping the web, stuff like that. There's so much available and you need to know that those things exist in order to come up with a good digital or growth hacking marketing strategy. And the last point, well, there's our marketeer. He knows the customer, he knows where to find him, builds exceptional experiences, like something that will, he or she knows what the customer really wants. He knows what usability is about, uses pricing as a marketing instrument. Like pricing is part of marketing. It's not just about return on investment. It's also about knowing how can I convince people with price and how can I play with that. And he finds alternative ways to the market. That's an interesting role for a marketeer for me. There's each startup, each company has there are always creative new ways of finding of finding customers. Maybe you don't have to go directly to the customer. Maybe you go through retail. Maybe you go through, like I was talking this morning to a startup, and they have a specific new building concept, and then the question was like, who are you going to sell to? The people who actually buy a building or have something built, the architects, the people who, the contractors, the aannemers, or the what's it called? The projectontwikkelaars, so the guys who develop building projects. So that's where a marketeer comes in and says like, okay, let's see what's the easiest way and the most flexible ones. Okay, so they ended up with, let's do it with the projectontwikkelaars. Let's focus on that. That's to me a decision a marketeer has to be able to make. So that kind of things you have to bring together. And ideally, Superman or Wonder Woman sits somewhere in the middle here. But unfortunately, I haven't seen many of those yet. Okay, so that closes off the afternoon. There's content, mobile, and growth marketing to think about, but especially come up with a strategy so you can set the right priorities for your different channels. Test, measure, learn. If you want to read all about it, this is the book. You can buy it on digitalmarketingplan.be, or just let me know, send me a mail. I'm in Antwerp or in Brussels or in Ghent quite often. I can get you one, and maybe I can convince Started to buy a few for you guys. Sometimes if you look for it, they'll be lying around the office, the building sometimes. So, because over the years I've distributed so many that they may be lying around. It's also available as an ebook. Interestingly enough, and I'll end with that, you may not expect that, but the sale of the ebook is going down every year. I don't know why. It started off with 2 to 3%, and I thought like, in 5 years it'll be 10%. No, it's like 1% or something now, or even less. So for some strange reason, I thought like this would be the book you would buy as an ebook, but apparently, so you cannot predict anything in this world of strange digital stuff. If you have any more questions, well, I can stay here for another 15 minutes, but we can also talk and connect. Yeah.
Are there any tools you can advise us to use in order to monitor and advance in this in creating a plan?
Start with your analytics. That's the most important one. I would say Google Analytics, it's free. It's way too complicated, but if you get your way around with that. And then all the other analytics parts of obviously Facebook and the other channels. A good content management system, good CRMs, a good content management system. Depends what you're building your website for. Oops. I'm a fan of Squarespace for simple, quick sites. I'm a fan of WordPress for a bit more sophisticated work. And then after that it's too difficult, you cannot say anything about that. WooRank is a good tool. There are some similar ones to that. I hear a lot of startups using for CRM our Belgian friends at Salesflare for sales, Odoo for, it's a bit more complicated, but I was looking for Team Leader, voila, that was so Team Leader seems to be okay as a very realistic, practical tool to like start following up stuff. I'm a big fan of Salesflare. They just left the building last Friday, but they're really good. What other tools are you thinking about? Because there's so many tools you can...
I don't know, things like Mixpanel, I guess. And,
all those.
Is there a way to aggregate all that data from all those different platforms into one organized tool where we can then play
I think
around?
you need a startup to do that. APIs. A lot comes to me, if you can boil down your startup to a website, so then analytics is where everything comes together. But it's...
Facebook Pixel, I guess. But it's again, silo-based. And
yes.
how we can get everything together and
I was working with...
create drip campaigns based on all that data.
There's no one... What we see is that all these marketing automation or all these type of tools are now gradually being bought by the big players like Adobe, Google, Microsoft, and they are bringing that together for now just commercially because the tools don't talk with one another. But you can see that coming, that one day they will talk with one another, but I'm afraid that by then they will have become so expensive that it will be no longer affordable for a startup. And that's also a risk, or to start a new startup, maybe Google will play a different role there, but for instance, like HubSpot is a nice example. They have this very nice strategy. You can get HubSpot very cheap as a startup, and then you're like all HubSpotted, and then because that has quite a lot of features in there, and then a certain moment you have to start paying, and then you're stuck, and then you don't have time to make a new site without HubSpot and to make the migration, and then one of the startups we invested in is like that. A year and a half ago, HubSpot is too expensive. Yeah, okay, so let's switch. Yeah, but I don't have time. I have to put my resources on my product. So they're paying HubSpot now quite a lot of money, a few thousand, I think 5,000 or 8,000 euros a year.
740 per month.
Yeah, voila. That's a lot of money.
Professional 1,000.
Yeah. So that's a lot of money you have to make. So you have to watch out also, but don't overdo it on the tools either. That's also a story. If you simply look at Google Analytics, I've given up, honestly. I've been using it for 10 years, but I'm not giving up. I'm restricting myself to what I know. You could spend the whole day only looking at Google Analytics, but you still also need to take some decisions there. So it's not such an easy thing. I'm a bit of a fan of building my own dashboards. Like you get the basics, what you really think you need, and then even the act, and now I'm going to sound very old-fashioned, but the act of going into your Google Analytics and looking up those 5 key numbers for today and then typing them into your spreadsheet and then going into the other tool and then those 3 numbers, you spend an hour just typing over numbers in your spreadsheet every day, will give you all the insights you need probably. But it's complicated, it's not automated, it's not the way it's going to grow on the long term. So.
Yeah, but it's also to get these people who actually, and then target them again. It's not just about
Yeah, if it's automation, yeah.
I mean,
Then you need one tool, and it doesn't, for the moment, it's difficult. I'm available if you, through Started or Think with People, contact me. We can always discuss. Good luck.